seen.
That which was divided has become one. It's time to go home.
I'll start by saying I was never hyped for this game, but my obsession with gaming meant I had to play it. That's my disclaimer. And it's also why I probably don't sound hugely disappointed, because I'm not. I just didn't expect this game to be the next best thing that many people understandably did. It's certainly been a tumultuous time for CDPR in the last couple of weeks. The reputation absolutely shredded, which I take no joy in saying at all. I do not think that there's much point in me going over the technical issues here. I'm playing on the PC on a relatively decent rig and it runs fine for the most part. I've experienced a handful of bugs that meant I needed to reload from an earlier save, but honestly nothing so bad that made it unplayable. I've been holding off doing a review for this just until I thought I had enough time under my belt with it, but honestly if I played another 40 hours, I'm sure it's not going to change my mind. And that sounds negative, but it's not. And before I go on, please consider dropping a like and or subscribing. Thanks. You play as V and you can start from one of 3 backgrounds. These have some bearing on your story as you go through, but not anything so huge it's going to make you want to try all 3 unless you're just that way inclined. A minor spoiler here, when you start out something will occur that leads you to your new life in Night City as a gun for hire / part-time cop / all-round lovable rogue. But instead of letting you play into that build and into that fantasy, you're treated to a montage that leads to that moment. Now, I'm not sure if that was originally going to be playable missions or if it was always the plan. I would have personally preferred playing the build-up a bit more, just to get that investment into my character, but instead it's quite jarring. It's not a deal breaker, it's just a bit odd. V himself, or herself, is sometimes likeable, but for the most part is a bland character. Hardly memorable, and for me that plays out for all the other characters as well. They act fine for what they are and they serve as the plot devices, but I'm hard pushed to recollect one that sticks with me other than Keanu Reeves, and maybe that's probably more that it is Keanu Reeves rather than this character Johnny Silverhand. I just wanted to make a side note on the dialect as well. I get regional dialect or even speak of the future, but there's some really egregious terminology here. Maybe it's just because a lot of these words are already a pet peeve of mine, and while I appreciate that some characters may sometimes say whelp or member instead of remember, it's all the time and it's really annoying. Does no one say business anymore? It's always biz, and no one says friend, it's tunes. Oh, and cash is eddies, or even worse, scratch. Welp, I've got the scratch tune, let's talk biz. It's just awful. And if Pan Am says, one more time, I'm going to throw my PC out of the window. The game has a rather comprehensive selection of skill trees, allowing you to spec into certain areas, for example, being a more efficient gunslinger, melee, or what I suspect most will go for is the net hacker, which allows you to utilise these cyber powers and implants to take down enemies or manipulate your surroundings via quick hacks and breaches, which are just hacks that require you to complete a minigame. Customisation wise, I find this part fun. V can be upgraded with all manner of modifications, which on a base level you could say the game's equivalent of spells. You can overheat enemies, which does damage over time, distract them, blind them, blow the circuits, prevent turrets and so on. Really how you go about this is up to you, and I'm sure I've spec'd into some of the poorer skills, but I'm still having no problem taking down rooms full of henchmen, though I find it gets old pretty quick. I put the game on hard from the start and I heard normal was just too easy, and even on hard it's not overly challenging. Don't expect hugely divergent story paths either. Yes, there are several that will directly alter the way the game ends, but throughout the game many of the missions, though they have several responses dialogue wise, they end up the same. You can of course approach scenarios how you want, but in the end, a result will likely be the same. For example, all enemies lay in bits while you run around hoovering up the loot. There are a lot of side missions and tasks, and you can see these dotted all over the map and take them on as you wish, and a handful of side missions that are rather good, and some grim, and I mean seriously grim. Many entail you blasting the locals to bits and collecting an item. The police activities are maybe some of the most annoying, and not because I don't like shooting up a group of crazed modified nutters, more because if they're so short-staffed and need me, how the 20 coppers instantly turn up the second I accidentally run down a few pedestrians. Still, it's a good way to level up and get cash. Sorry, Eddies. Scratch. Loot-wise, it's what you'd expect from this type of game. It's got the rarity tiers from uncommon through to epic, etc. And this applies to all these items, clothes, weapons and modifications. You'll find them off enemies, in chests, from vendors, or you can craft them as well. Crafting is pretty rudimentary. It's part A plus part B equals item. Just note, as crazy as you can make V look, it's all a bit pointless in this game, as it's first person only and you only ever see V in the mirror, on the inventory screen, or if you choose third person view while in or on a vehicle, but not on foot. It's always first person. Night City is a beautiful place and it has character. You traverse it on foot or in one of the many vehicles. You can earn more of these as you progress, either buy them or complete certain missions. It feels very GTA in this respect, and there's nothing really wrong with it. It's simply fine. I do like the fact that you can call one of your vehicles no matter where you are. It's all a bit Knight Rider the way it just turns up. I just really wish you could upgrade your car with guns and the AI so it could turn up mid-fight and start blasting down all the enemies. That'd be properly badass, but you can't. Also, there are plenty of flying vehicles, but bar scripted sections, you never get your hands on one of these to use freely. To surmise, the game is more action-adventure than RPG, despite all its stats and upgrade trappings. This is not your next Fallout or Baldur's Gate. The story does not offer a great deal in the way of choice, and this is not something I have an issue with personally, but coming from the Witcher devs, you may have expected something more hard-hitting and branching. The combat is real-time and shares more with Mass Effect than it does with something more based on dice rolls. Character customization is under-explained, and it suffers as a result, but there is fun to be had playing with V's abilities, though for me, not to the point where I'd want to do a Cyber Ninja playthrough or some other focus spec. It's very much a game that once it's done, I'm out. Missions are fun but rarely take any risks. There's a fair bit of on-rails action that feels really out of place in 2020. It literally has a section where you fire a minigun from the side of a helicopter. It just makes the mission design feel dated. AI is broken and stupid to the point that stealth is either laughably easy or ruined because somehow an enemy sees you 2 rooms away and starts shouting and shooting when you're not even near them. There's a nice variety of weapons to play with some rather special ones if you take the time to find them. I would have liked to have seen a third-person view, and I do believe somebody's modded that in. That's just a personal preference. I just much prefer that view, though it would require a combat rework, I assume, as there's no cover options and the likes that would no doubt be required for that view. Any difficulty is easily negated by quick hacks, which I get that's maybe the point, but combine this with dim AI and it's extremely easy to make a mockery of any given fight. All in all, it's competent and at times it's very fun. It's not original and it doesn't have me thinking about it when I'm not playing it. It would be nice to see Night City from the perspective of some of the other characters, or to become a hideous over-modded cyber freak with insane abilities, but that doesn't really happen. This doesn't fulfill that dream. Taking on missions your way is technically possible, but when you know the easiest way is to overeat a few mobs and then shoot them for good measure, trying some over-complex approach that involves controlling cameras and distracting enemies, then sneaking about seems a complete waste of time. The game is simply just alright. I can see the love and devotion that's gone into crafting it. It's clear, and I'm not disputing that. It's clearly had huge scope and sky-high goals, and it's achieved that only in part. I know I'm a nothing channel. I just enjoy doing these reviews in my very limited spare time and bring my honest opinion, and reviewing this has not been particularly enjoyable at all, and I think that's because it's fun to review a terrible game and it's really fun to review a great game, and this one just treads the line. The game can be recommended to a select few, those who enjoy open world games without over complex systems and that have a really decent gaming PC. I wouldn't touch it with yours with a console though. There is a great game in here trying to get out, and maybe in a year's time it will be that game, But it's not that now. Cheers.